Sleeping Dogs was one of the sleeper hits during the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 era of consoles. The game was developed by United Front Games and was a relatively new game developer when they started working on Sleeping Dogs, which was originally being developed as a sequel to the True Crime game series. Licensing rights did not work out, so Activision ended up canceling the project due to similar open world games taking the spotlight like GTA and Red Dead Redemption. So Square Enix stepped in and acquired the publishing rights to this new game and renamed it Sleeping Dogs. The game was finished and then released in 2012 for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. And the game was received well by critics and fans alike for its combat system and detail in the open world. And the game started out selling very well. 1 month after release, Square Enix announced that the game had already sold 1.5 million copies worldwide. Unfortunately, the game would only go on to sell another 1.75 million copies in fiscal 2013, and then Square Enix announced that they saw the game as a failure in terms of sales, but did acknowledge that the game was well reviewed. The report stated, quote, "In the HD games category, we delivered 3 major titles in the fiscal year under review, primarily in Europe and North America. These titles, Sleeping Dogs, Hitman Absolution, and Tomb Raider, failed to reach their respective targets and resulted in financially unsatisfactory consequences." A few months after the original release of Sleeping Dogs, it was later learned that United Front had started the early talks of a sequel. The game unfortunately never entered production, and the studio was later closed in 2016, which was a loss for the gaming industry. But in 2016, Vice was able to get some exclusive information about the canceled Sleeping Dogs 2. So let's break this all down and let's get into why Sleeping Dogs 2 was canceled and everything we know about the undeveloped sequel that United Front wanted to release. As always, all the links to the sources, if still available, will be down below, so make sure to check those out. And also follow my Twitter account, Fonked2, for updates on all future videos. And with that out of the way, let's get right into it. So the first bit of information that Vice mentions is that the game was going to be designed for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, but these consoles were still under codenames because this was prior to their release in November 2013. And once again, this was just a pitch for the game. We assume United Front started this pitch as soon as Sleeping Dogs 1 was finished, so in 2012, and then the game wasn't canceled until late 2013 when it didn't really get a chance, but Square Enix just did not want to move forward with their pitch. And Vice was able to get some exclusive information and details from the sources at United Front. Now, they go on to say Sleeping Dogs 2 would have been a direct sequel to the original game, and picked up the story of Wei Shen, and this time he would be joined by a conflicted and corrupt partner named Henry Fang. They would be exploring the real-life area of China's Pearl River megacity. In terms of gameplay, some new additions is the player would be able to arrest any NPC in the world, and there would be branching storylines between both Shen and Fang. One example of how this works was given and said, quote, "An opening scene consists of Wei and Fang talking together, discussing what the next steps of an investigation should be, deciding to split up and follow different leads. Wei's thread will follow him as he busts heads for information, while Fang plants evidence by breaking into a suspect's house. Depending on the character selected, the audience and the characters will only see one side of the story until both threads are played. This gives us ample opportunity to explore both characters fully and gives the player the revelatory experience of discovering both sides of the story." Another feature they wanted to add was mobile functionality, either with phones or tablets, which would give the players extra features within the game through their mobile devices using the cloud. The quote for this said, "Playing as Inspector Jane Teng, you would manage the police force and try to control territories from your mobile device. If you own Sleeping Dogs 2, your choices in the mobile game influenced what's happening in the city, the gangs in control, etc. If you summoned a police patrol on a mobile device, you'd see that in-game as a helicopter flying by. If you didn't own Sleeping Dogs 2, the hope was to craft an enjoyable free-to-play game that pointed you towards the console game." Now, the information continued on and discussed living world adjustments, which would take the player's actions into account and would change the world because of that. Some of these factors could be if the player stopped crimes while they were playing, took a bribe, and they mentioned many others, and would change the city and other players' games as well. And the direct quote said, "But players could focus their efforts on cleaning up specific parts of a town as a community and turn crime-ridden places into livable neighborhoods." So they were saying that because everyone's world infected everyone else's, it's probably impossible to get everyone on the same page with one map either going full corrupt or trying to do a very good playthrough, but it could be possible to clean up maybe specific parts of town and keep it clean from other players who are impacting the world negatively. An image from this pitch was included as well, which mentioned the population of cities. Their clothing would change, population density could change depending on how dangerous the city was based on your decisions, vehicle spawns, and so many more features that would all be based upon actions you took in game. And this would be achieved by cloud saves, which would link all players to each other, and then it would measure crime levels and then use that data to make changes in the game itself. An image of how the app would work as well was included, which includes some text saying you control the police. The game was also set to have full co-op support. They wanted the entire open world to be played solo, and then certain missions or challenges could be co-op. They mentioned possible challenges like vehicle races, fight club challenges, or waves of enemies, and that they were looking at procedurally generated missions that could fit into this co-op or solo model as well. The procedurally generated missions could mix together objectives, locations, and enemies from campaign missions and then give these new objectives to the players. A direct quote from that says, quote, "One campaign tasked players to go through the rundown gambling district to eliminate a triad that is controlling it. They meet a snitch that helps them throughout their experience. After players complete the campaign, the MSP, massively single player, decides that such action was enough to change the state of the district to a more stable one. They try another campaign later on that allows them to come back to the district, but now the snitch they met is a small business owner that gives them a discount in his store." They also mentioned wanting to include twists within this procedurally generated content. The example given in the pitch states that the mission would start as a corrupt case given to the player to find a corrupt police officer, but as they start investigating, they find that the target NPC or the corrupt police officer is found dead, and then that changes the entire course of the mission, and that all is just random. On top of that, another image was shown on how they wanted rewards and incentives to work for the cooperative experience. Another feature United Front wanted to add was a face system, which would measure Way's favor with different factions within the city, which would then result in bonuses or change missions depending on which factions were involved. And the last image that was included has to do with campaign generation, and included some more details about co-op campaign missions and how they were being made. As the article continues on, it goes into a few of the smaller details we do know. So we do know that United Front had only worked on experimental and basic prototypes, and the game was not very far along at all at the time of cancellation. And they were putting a lot of time into the pitch, working out what they wanted the sequel to look like before they started development. They also stated that many of the developers who worked on the original game were burnt out after the original and not quite ready to work on a sequel. The development for the first game started many years before it was released and went from a true crime Hong Kong game to something completely new and switching publishers. So they did mention that that took a toll on a lot of the workers there and that some were burnt out, but many of the developers were still excited to work on a sequel. And after Sleeping Dogs 2 was canceled in late 2013, United Front did get to work on a game called Triad Wars, which took many elements from Sleeping Dogs and put it in a multiplayer-centric game that never really stuck with Sleeping Dogs fans and never really got the attention or momentum to keep development. And after that came out and was lackluster, the studio ended up deciding to shut down, which is very sad and it's very unfortunate. There's also been speculation after all of that if United Front is out of the picture and if Square Enix still owns the rights, they could produce their own Sleeping Dogs sequel and give it to one of their developers, One that was brought up back in 2013 was Crystal Dynamics, but now we know Crystal Dynamics is currently working on the upcoming Avengers title, and we know that they want to keep that title moving for many years probably to come, so that really doesn't seem too likely either, but it doesn't change the fact that Square Enix could give this property to a developer to work on if they ever wanted to come back to Sleeping Dogs 2. And it's not impossible that Square Enix brings this title back, and that really just all depends on if fans want it, and if that can outweigh the development cost of an open world game. And for the most part, that's everything we know about the canceled Sleeping Dogs 2 and why it was canceled. As always, make sure to like and share this video, subscribe for weekly gaming news, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Live like a true triad and get to know the 4 districts of Hong Kong in and out. Try and hold a tune at the karaoke bars. Risk your good looks at the local fight club. Double down for extra cash at the offshore gambling dens. Or hit the dockyards to bet on cockfights. And then, there are the ladies.